12-year-old Emma Davis stood at the gates of Willow Creek Middle School, her second-hand backpack slung over one shoulder, her thrift store shoes slightly worn at the soles. The school loomed large in front of her, an elegant red brick building, nestled in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in town. Compared to the modest world she came from, this place felt like another universe. Emma had just transferred from a small inner-city school after her father found work in a nearby town. Since her mother's passing 2 years ago, life had been difficult. Money was tight and joy even tighter. Emma had always been quiet, shy, and a little strange in the eyes of other kids. Not because she was odd, but because she felt most at home in solitude, especially when she played the old violin her mother left her. It was cracked, a little, out of tune, but it held her mother's memory in every note. On her first day, Emma quickly learned that Willow Creek had its own social hierarchy. The popular kids dressed in designer clothes and carried the newest phones. They rolled their eyes at her hand-me-down jacket and whispered behind her back in the halls. The worst of them was Rachel Monroe, the self-appointed queen of the 8th grade, charming in front of teachers, cruel behind their backs. Emma became an easy target. She didn't fight back. She didn't speak up. She just tried to stay invisible. But invisibility wasn't easy when you were different. 1 week into her new school, the principal announced the upcoming school talent show, a big annual event where students could perform music, dance, or comedy in front of their peers. Teachers saw it as a celebration of talent. Students saw it as a popularity contest. Rachel and her group, who always performed flashy dance routines and lip-sync numbers, began taking sign-ups. That's when Emma became their next source of amusement. During lunch in front of the entire cafeteria, Rachel turned to Emma with a syrupy sweet smile. "Hey, new girl," she called. "You should totally sign up for the talent show. Maybe play something like the violin." The cafeteria went silent, then erupted into laughter. Everyone knew Emma was poor. How would she even own a violin, let alone play one? Emma paused, the air thick with humiliation. Her cheeks flushed, but she didn't cry. She looked Rachel in the eye for the first time. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll do it." The laughter died down, confused by her calm reply. Rachel blinked. "Wait, really?" Emma nodded once, then walked away, leaving whispers in her wake. Some thought she was joking. Others figured she'd just embarrass herself. Either way, the rumor spread fast. The poor girl was going to play the violin in the talent show. What no one knew was that Emma had been playing since she was 5. Her mother had taught her every note, every bowing technique, using that old violin they could barely afford. Her music was all she had left of her, and now she was going to share it with a school that never expected anything from her, except to fail. After Emma's quiet but firm acceptance to perform in the talent show, the atmosphere around school shifted. It wasn't admiration or curiosity, it was anticipation of a disaster. By the next morning, rumors were flying. "Did you hear? That poor girl's actually going to play," students would whisper in the halls. "She probably doesn't even have a violin," someone else would laugh. Most students didn't expect talent, they expected humiliation. To them, Emma was walking straight into a trap. Rachel Monroe, the queen bee who had set the trap, was enjoying every minute. She had meant the violin comment as a joke, a sarcastic way to mock Emma's poverty. But when Emma agreed without hesitation, it threw Rachel off balance. Still, she quickly recovered and leaned into the prank. "Well," she told her group, "at least the show will have some comedy." In reality, Emma was anything but foolish. She hadn't accepted the challenge. For attention, revenge, or to prove anything to Rachel. She said yes because the thought of playing her violin, even once in front of others, meant more to her than any insult ever could. It was her only way to feel close to her late mother, who had once told her, "When words fail you, play. Let the music say what you can't." Emma's violin wasn't pretty. It had scratches, a worn neck, and a bow held together with glue and tape. But to her, it was beautiful. Her mother had found it at a pawn shop when Emma was 5, and taught her how to cradle it like a living thing. Since then, it had become her secret companion. No one at Willow Creek knew about it. Emma practiced in an old garage her father borrowed, from a neighbor, always alone, always after finishing chores and homework. But now, her music couldn't remain a secret. Emma began practicing late into the nights, revisiting her favorite piece, Meditation, from Thais by Massenet, the same one her mother had played for her bedside when she was sick. The notes came back to her like old friends, rising and falling in waves of emotion. Her fingers hurt, and the bow skipped sometimes, but she poured everything she had into every measure. Music, not pride, was her fuel. Meanwhile, whispers turned into mock bets among the students. "She'll squeak through the first 10 seconds, someone said. "I bet she doesn't even show up," said another. Even some teachers seemed skeptical, though a few looked on with quiet concern. One person who noticed Emma's seriousness was Mr. Harold, the school janitor. One evening, as he was locking up, he heard the haunting strains of her violin drifting from the empty garage. He followed the sound and stood quietly outside the door, stunned by what he heard. Not a joke, not a disaster, but raw, unpolished brilliance. He didn't interrupt. The next day, without saying a word, he left a small package for Emma, new violin strings and rosée, with a note that simply said, "Keep playing." Emma's hands trembled when she opened it. Someone believed in her. Maybe the first person, in this new place, who did. She knew she still had to face the stage, still had to face Rachel in a room full of doubters. But now, she wasn't playing because she was dared. She was playing because she had something to say. And finally, people would listen. With the talent show only 2 weeks away, Emma slipped into a quiet routine few noticed, but one that meant everything to her. Each afternoon, after school let out and the crowd of students filtered away in buzzing groups, Emma walked alone to the rundown garage 2 blocks from her apartment. The space was dusty, dimly lit and filled with cobwebs, but to Emma it was sacred ground. It was the only place in her new world where she didn't feel small or judged. There, she began to prepare, not to impress or to prove anything, but to speak through her violin, the only voice she trusted. With every stroke of the bow and every trembling note, she poured her fear, her grief, and her hope into the strings. The piece she chose, Meditation from Thais, wasn't flashy or loud like the pop songs the other students were preparing. But it was soulful, emotional. It meant something. Each day, Emma practiced with her battered violin, fingers aching from worn strings, the bow's grip rough against her palm. She didn't complain. Instead, she lost herself in the melodies that had once lulled her to sleep as a child, played by her mother in the fading glow of a bedside lamp. In those moments, Emma wasn't a poor girl or a punchline. She was a musician, and her music was a memory, a connection, and a healing force. Despite the solitude, she was never entirely alone. Unbeknownst to her, Mr. Harold, the school janitor, continued to check in from afar. Ever since hearing her play that one evening, he made it a quiet mission to help from the shadows. One day, she arrived at the garage to find a folding chair waiting for her instead of the crate she'd been using. Another day, a music stand appeared. Most meaningful of all was the gently repaired violin case with new strings and a polished bow left with a small note. "Your music deserves to be heard. Keep playing." Emma was overwhelmed. Tears welled up in her eyes as she clutched the bow. No one had ever encouraged her like that since her mother passed. Not the kids at school. Not even her overworked father, who barely had time to hear her play between his late shifts. But someone had seen her and believed in what she could do. At school, the mocking continued. Students joked in the hallways about her big violin debut. Some even faked crying dramatically whenever she walked past, pretending to be moved already. Rachel, confident the whole thing would be a disaster, had already picked out her front row seat to watch Emma fall apart on stage. But Emma didn't react. She didn't flinch. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was focus. Every laugh she ignored added another layer of intensity to her performance. Every insult sharpened her drive. In the stillness of that dusty garage with calloused fingers and a hopeful heart, Emma was crafting something beautiful. Not a revenge act, not a cry for attention, just pure, vulnerable music. A message she couldn't yet speak in words. She was preparing to share a part of herself the world had never seen. And when the curtain rose, she would be ready. The day of the talent show arrived like a storm. Posters lined the hallways, the auditorium buzzed with chatter, and students whispered eagerly about the night's big event. Not the dance team, not the magician, not the choir. The thing everyone truly came to see was whether Emma Davis, the quiet poor girl, would actually show up, and whether she would crash and burn on stage. Backstage, chaos filled the air. Glittered costumes, last-minute rehearsals, loud laughter, and nervous pacing surrounded Emma, but she remained still. Clutching her violin case tightly, she sat in the corner, eyes closed, blocking out the noise. Her stomach churned, not because she feared embarrassment, but because this moment wasn't just a performance. It was a farewell to her mother, a tribute, a truth waiting to be heard. She was the second to last act. When her name was called, a hush rippled through the crowd. A few chuckled knowingly. Some leaned forward, waiting for the show to become a spectacle. Rachel smiled smugly, arms folded, eyes gleaming with anticipation. Emma stepped onto the stage under the harsh spotlight, alone. No backing track, no flashy outfit, just her old, now gently restored violin and the quiet strength in her spine. She took her position, tuned the strings quickly, and looked out at a sea of doubtful faces. Then she closed her eyes and began to play. The first note floated through the air like a whisper, soft, uncertain, but then the melody deepened. The auditorium, moments ago filled with snickers and whispers, fell completely silent. Emma's bow glided across the strings with elegance and urgency, telling a story that words could never express. It was haunting, beautiful, painful. It was a conversation between a daughter and the memory of her mother. Every note of meditation flowed like tears unshed. Her fingers danced with emotion, rising and falling like waves in a storm. In that moment, she wasn't Emma the poor girl. She was Emma the artist, Emma the storyteller, Emma the daughter saying goodbye. One by one, the audience sat up straighter. Teachers froze mid-whisper. The popular kids looked at each other, no longer amused, but awestruck. Rachel's smirk faded, her brows furrowed in disbelief. Emma didn't see their faces. She wasn't performing for them. She was playing for her mother, for herself, for every moment of silence, every insult she had swallowed. And her music was louder than anything they could say. As the final note faded into stillness, the room held its breath. Emma lowered her violin slowly. Her heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the emotional release that swept through her like a wave. There was no immediate applause. Just stunned, weighted silence. And then it came. First a single clap, then another, until the entire room erupted in a standing ovation. Cheers, whistles, even tears. Teachers wiped their eyes. Some students stood in disbelief. Even those who mocked her the most now couldn't hide their emotion. Emma gave a small, graceful bow. She didn't beam or boast. She simply walked off stage, head held high, violin in hand. She had said everything she needed to say, and she had said it beautifully. When Emma stepped off stage, the sound of applause still echoed behind her. The warm buzz of a standing ovation followed her like a tide, washing over everything that had come before. Every cruel whisper, every smirk, every joke. But Emma didn't let it overwhelm her. She simply walked quietly back to her corner backstage, placed her violin gently in its case, and sat down. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from release. She had done it. She had told her story without saying a word. Back, in the auditorium, the crowd was still coming to terms with what they'd witnessed. For many students, it was the first time they had really seen Emma. The girl they mocked had just transformed the entire room with nothing but 4 strings and her heart. A few kids whispered apologies to each other. Others stared down at their hands, unsure how to feel. Rachel Monroe sat stiffly in the front row, her arms crossed but her posture cracked. She hadn't expected this. Not the silence. Not the emotion. Not the tears streaming down Ms. Langford's face. The music teacher who had quietly watched the whole performance with growing awe. Rachel had orchestrated the joke, but somehow, the punchline had become a standing ovation. She bit her lip, confused and humiliated. Her planned mockery had turned into the most powerful moment of the night, and she had nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, backstage, Emma was approached by someone she least expected, Ms. Langford, who had left the auditorium mid-applause just to speak with her. "Emma," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Emma looked down, unsure how to respond. "My mom taught me," she said quietly. "Before she passed away." Ms. Langford nodded, deeply. "Wait, your technique is raw but natural, and your emotion? It's rare to see that in someone your age. I think it's time you had a real stage." She handed Emma a brochure for a prestigious youth conservatory for music located in the nearby city. "I have some connections there," she continued. "If you're willing, I'd like to recommend you for a scholarship audition. You have a gift, Emma. Don't let it stay hidden anymore." Emma stared at the paper, heart pounding. Her hands shook again, but this time it wasn't nerves. It was hope. Word spread quickly. The performance became the story of the night. Teachers spoke about it in the lounge the next morning. Students shared a video someone had secretly recorded, and it began to circulate online, gaining views rapidly. Some classmates even approached Emma in the hall, not with sarcasm, but with awe. "You were incredible," they said. "I didn't know." For once, their words weren't cruel. They were sincere. Even Rachel avoided eye contact. The prank she designed had backfired spectacularly, but in doing so it revealed something none of them had expected. Truth, pain, and beauty in a way that only music could deliver. Emma didn't feel like a star. She didn't want to be one. She only wanted to keep playing. And now, for the first time in a long while, she believed she could. The week following the talent show felt like a dream Emma had never dared to have. For the first time since she transferred to Willow Creek Middle School, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't mocked. Instead, her classmates greeted her with nods, smiles, and even small compliments. "That was beautiful," someone said as they passed her in the hall. "You made me cry," another whispered shyly at lunch. Emma didn't know how to respond at first. For so long, she had braced herself against cruelty and indifference, building quiet walls around her heart. But now, those walls were beginning to crack, not from pain, but from warmth. Slowly, she started to accept the kindness, not with pride, but with quiet gratitude. The viral video of her performance had now spread beyond the school. Local news outlets had picked it up, calling her the violin girl with the heart of gold. Messages poured in from strangers online, musicians, teachers, and everyday people who had been touched by her music. Some wrote how the piece reminded them of lost loved ones. Others simply said thank you. Emma read them late into the night, sometimes with tears in her eyes, clutching the violin case that had carried her through the storm. True to her word, Ms. Langford arranged an audition for Emma at the Ridgeway Conservatory of Music, one of the top youth programs in the state. The scholarship would cover everything: lessons, instruments, travel. When Emma and her father visited for the first time, they were overwhelmed. The halls rang with the sounds of violins, cellos, and pianos. The other students were talented, confident, many from wealthy backgrounds. Emma felt small again, but this time she didn't feel unworthy. She had earned her place here. The audition was held in a grand room with a polished floor and tall windows that let in the afternoon light. Emma stood alone in the center, violin in hand. She chose the same piece, meditation, and played not with fear but with purpose. Her hands no longer trembled. Her music spoke of everything she had endured: the loneliness, the sorrow, the tiny moments of hope. And when she finished, the judges didn't applaud. They sat in thoughtful silence, visibly moved. A week later, the letter arrived. Full scholarship awarded. Welcome to Ridgeway Conservatory. Emma didn't jump or scream. She sat on the couch next to her father, holding the letter, and let herself smile. A real, quiet, radiant smile. Back at Willow Creek, things had changed. Rachel kept her distance, her confidence shaken. Some kids tried to befriend Emma, not because she was cool, but because they respected her. She hadn't shouted or fought back. She had simply played. And in doing so, she had become someone unforgettable. But Emma never let the attention distract her. She still practiced daily, still used the old garage when she could. She never forgot Mr. Harold's kindness or her mother's words. Let the music say what you can't. The joke that was meant to break her had become her beginning. Emma Davis, once the quiet girl with nothing, now had a future shaped not by circumstance but by the music inside her, and she would never stop playing.